Welcome to Switching On Electrified Skills, the podcast that sparks your curiosity and ignites your passion for a career in electrification. I'm Deepak Farmer. Join me on this electrifying adventure where I connect you with industry leaders, visionary education providers, and pioneers driving the electric revolution. Discover the world of skills, jobs, and community, gaining actionable insights, inspiring stories, and the latest developments.
All my guests have interesting backgrounds, but today I'm joined by someone who has an even more unusual background, Jonty Deeley-Williamson from UKBIC Industrialisation Centres.
Thank you very much for having me.
So today I'm really interested in your background because you've had a really interesting journey. Now, obviously, we'll come to talking about the battery industrialisation centres and the work that you've been doing as part of your role as head of learning and development at the centre. But I really want to get into some of your history because I find that fascinating. Now, we've spoken a few times about this and, would you believe it that you're working in this space now, but your journey started somewhere else. So take me back to the young Jonty.
Yeah, so absolutely. I suffer from quite bad ADHD and dyslexia. Born in 91, so a lovely lawless time, as it were, under obviously a Labour government. They were very pushy for everyone to get a science degree or a degree. They were very much pushing, especially my school, Watford Boys Grammar School, was a school that led on to a lot of red brick universities. So it very much pushed you towards, you go to university, get a degree, and you will get a job. That was quite a nice theory back in sort of late 2000s. Didn't quite pan out as we move forward. So as I finished my degree. So my love of education really came from the fact that I had a few number of teachers that really cared. My chosen degree in the end was marine biology, marine vertebrate zoology. And the reason I chose biology was because one of my teachers, Glyn Parry, really nice guy, but he made learning education fun. He very much cared that I was neurodiverse, that I couldn't focus on certain things in a normal way, and really differentiated his lessons and made it so I had the ability to learn. So that sort of led me on a path of, you know what, I think I roughly know what I want to do, but not 100%. But Labour government, absolute confidence in them as a young individual. In hindsight, maybe not the best thing to do, but I went, you know what, I'll just do a degree then. My mum wanted me to do engineering, but I really struggled with the GCSE physics syllabus because you had to remember all of the formulas, which, as it turns out in the real world, doesn't matter. We have Google, we have phones, we can write things down. And I very much remember it always sticks with me, which is teachers always shouting, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket when you're older. Not realising the smartphone was quite quickly coming through and we'd have all the information of the world at our fingertips. So I didn't take A-level physics. I did biology, chemistry, computing and maths. Sort of a nice rounded one to get a degree in a sciencey subject. One of the things that I think definitely falls short in schools and education is you don't start talking about what degrees you want to do until you're basically in sixth form. You don't think about that when you choose your GCSEs. You don't really think about that when you choose your schools. Obviously now, when I was younger, we didn't have academies, but now very much academies are the in thing. We want to put people in academies, get schools to work together so we can pool resources. Makes a lot of sense, but they sort of focus on a lot of things. So my old school is now a science, technology and engineering academy. Good for the school, fantastic, but it sort of pushes you down a pathway. And when you are going into year 7, heck, even when I was going to A-level, I had no idea what I wanted to do as a job. The exposure I had was anything you see on TV. So police, working for the NHS, being a fireman, a sports star. My dad used to work in IT sales, so my brain was very much set on maybe I could do IT sales. There was no sort of exposure to any other careers. So when I started doing my degree, I'll do marine biology. It's a fun degree. I like scuba diving. It made my choices easier because at my point there was only 5 universities that did marine biology. So my 5 choices, bish, bash, bosh, nice and easy. But I ended up going to Bank University at North Wales, fantastic university, really good for marine biology, and started my degree. I originally signed up for a Masters of Marine Biology, But my father passed away in my second year, and I sort of said, look, don't really want to stay in academia any much. It's not really for me. I'm not an academic person. I'm more of a doer. I want to get things done. So left university, unfortunately, due to my father's passing away, with a third, which nowadays is slightly treated like you're a pariah. Yes, you have a BSc honours, but it's just a third in inverted commas. And my first thought was I want to go into education. I'd been really pushed forward to learn and develop as a person by the teacher, Glyn Parry, really nice person. So I went to University of Hertfordshire, which is where down near where I used to live. And I went, can I do marine biology? And they went, you know what, come in for an interview and then tell us when you get your degree results. Went in for an interview, had a great interview, then came my degree results. And they went, no, we don't want you, you've got a third. The least we'll take is a 2-2. And that really pissed me off, I'm not going to lie, because I've always seen education, the people who get firsts and 2-1s, they're your high flyers. They're going to work in the City of London. They're going to go work in engineering, move on to PhDs. They're the thinkers.
It's a strange misconception there. But, just before we go any further, when you talked about your journey there, some of the interesting things that you said were about things you couldn't do and therefore felt almost directed to a certain path. If you were to go back, right, and if there are teachers and principals and school people listening to this podcast, what would you want to see different, right, in that space, right, and in that journey that you took that would have maybe got you where you needed to be?
I think the support and showing that going to university is not the be-all and end-all. We're a very service-driven country. We always see it. City of London, one of the most busiest places, massive amount of degrees. In my opinion, and this is just me throwing my 2 cents in, but working on a degree is not the be-all and end-all. I would have almost preferred if my school would have had a stronger link to apprenticeships and potentially college. I don't think I hit my full potential sitting in an academic classroom. And you've heard me say it before. The one I like to do when I do talks is ask people of my age, what's the mitochondria? And almost every time you'll get, it's the powerhouse of the cell, because that's what we were taught at school. But then if you ask someone, so how? They look at you and go, I was taught to parrot, it's the powerhouse of the cell. And that's where I think education, especially in the UK, is very fixed and sort of set in its old ways, is we teach to pass an exam. We don't teach people to think.
Yeah, and you mentioned something a while ago about a question about wind around the curriculum that was there. Well, can you just tell me about that as well? Because I remember you saying this. This was very important.
So back when I was teaching, obviously spent a lot of time looking through old exam papers and sort of passing them to the students. And at one point, to get an answer or get a mark for the pros and cons of wind power, you had to say that wind power is unreliable and therefore potentially not suited to support the UK's needs.
That's really interesting. For a young person, really, who can be, influenced quite heavily there and is being influenced by their teachers, it embeds in their mind, right, even subconsciously, but, in an exam question, almost definitely, right, that something like that is not right and is not a solution, yet we know that completely is completely the opposite. And as you're coming up through this, I guess asking the question now, I had a guest, Dr. Audrey Tang, who pointed out that kids are often asked the wrong questions, right? They're asked, what do you want to be, as opposed to what do you want to do, right? And it's an important thing. Now, had somebody had said to you, what do you want to do, right? As opposed to what do you want to be. It's not a job title, it's not a thing, but what do you actually like doing, right? What would your answer have been at the time?
Well, it probably would have been something around the training. It would have been trying to deliver knowledge to people, share my enthusiasm for what we want to do. I always think that it sounds a bit cliche, but everyone's got a teacher or trainer in them. I mean, I'm a father quite recently. Daughter's 18 months old now. The amount of things I've realised that me and my wife are teaching her is immense. Even when I sit down at lunch to have a nice conversation with people, you're almost always learning from other people. And I think for me, I would have gone, I want to do something like that. I want to do something that's practical, that allows me to share my knowledge and enthusiasm in whatever subject it may be.
That's such an important thing you just said there, because the context, this is why I really like the idea of asking the question, what do you want to do, as opposed to, what do you want to be, right? What do you like doing? Because really, if you wanted to teach and train people, you can do it in so many contexts, right? You do it as a parent. You just said it. You do it in a training, as if you're a trainer, learning and development, as you are head of learning and development. You can do it in the pub when you're speaking to somebody that is just trying to get more information about batteries or anything that you want to do. But we do that in all walks of life. It doesn't have to be categorized by one particular job role, and I think that's an important part of that journey. Now, as you've come through this now, like I said, extremely strange background because you've gone down the route of marine biology. So the first time you told me that, I was thinking, because my daughter said, I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I was thinking, God, I've met someone that's actually a marine biologist, right? So, he's going to be working with what my daughter thinks is working with dolphins and, with sharks and, all this sort of stuff. Now, at some point or another, you changed your path. Now, it sounds like from what you said, the university who said that you had a third almost did you a favor, right? So what was your journey at that point, and what did you do next?
I'm still quite stubborn. So even the fact they said, yeah, we don't want you, I still want to be a teacher. I still want to get down, go into education and help people, mostly because, as I said beforehand, the curriculum is not directed towards neurodiverse people. And we keep seeing headlines that there's more and more of us. And I don't think there's more and more of us. I just think we're getting better at finding it. There's a story that someone sort of says, which is, back in the day, we didn't have autism. We didn't have these things. And the response was, we probably did. It was probably a village elder going, Johnny, he's not great with people, but he's great with sheep. So let's make him a shepherd. Yeah. We've always had these sorts of people. It's just how we direct them. And as we become more and more focused on education and output, we've sort of squeezed them out because their skills may not be in delivering educational work in a classroom. They may be wonderfully artistic. They may be a great thinker, like Einstein. So I really want to get in and say, no, I want to make a difference to these people. I really want to focus on the minorities that are there to really push them forward, as I was pushed forward. So I went to originally work in a wholesale aquatic shop called Tropical Marine Centre because I needed a job, in essence. And they do import-export of fish for most of the large aquariums, so both shops and sort of your sea life centres. So I worked there for a bit and quickly realised that shift work and what it wasn't what I wanted to do. I still wanted to train. At that point, I was also trained to be a scout leader. So I was always very much in that frame of mind of trying to train people, enhance skills. So I applied for a job as a technician in a school with the idea that I'll go as a technician, I'll work for a few years, and then I'll move up doing a straight teaching course. So I'll learn by doing, allowing me to almost bypass the issue of having a third and not being good enough to teach. So I went to a school, the Bush Academy, really good school. It had just been sort of rebought by another trust, the Mellor Trust, and joined in. They just basically rebuilt the whole school. It used to be the Royal Masonic School for Boys over in Bushy. And I joined as a science technician. And I had a great team. And I learnt a lot, supported all of the delivery in the science lab, which then again proved that I like doing practical things. I don't like sitting there and pointing at a screen and talking for 4 or 5 hours. I like saying, here's a problem, you solve it. So supported by the team in the school, I moved on and managed to successfully join their cover department to get some experience of actually in lesson delivery, but with the content being set by qualified teachers. So I did that for a while, but also with the focus that I want to become a science teacher. So I joined up to a stretch teaching course offered by an Irish college, which the school had done before with a few others. And quite quickly, it made me aware of how dire education is, not from the people delivering it. The people delivering it are doing their best. Yes. But the science department was understaffed and they could not find teachers. So unfortunately, to cover them, I was having a whole timetable. I wasn't allowed, because of the numbers, not the school's fault, but how education maybe is viewed as a whole and teachers, I wasn't allowed to have a 50% timetable. They needed me to teach full time. All well and good, moved forward with it, pushed forward, but it became quite quickly evident that I couldn't keep up with learning to be a teacher, planning individual lessons, dealing with all these things and learning while also putting through. So I did that for a while and then I basically turned around and went, yeah, it's not for me.
Yeah. Because ultimately, you did it because you wanted to help people. Mm-hmm. And the moment you realize, now I'll go back to my own teaching days, and if you're not helping people, if what you set out to do, you're not doing, because of all the bureaucracies and all the additional things that you do. Now, even on a 50% timetable, right? You know, your individual learning plans, you're dealing with student issues, you're dealing with, you know, the teaching, you're dealing with assessment, you're then marking the assessment. You're doing so much as a teacher. And that pressure of, how much of it is adding value to that student, right? What is the student actually getting at the end of it? Now, you could say that, you know, certain students will succeed. And we tend to measure, you know, by, you know, oh yeah, these students have been successful. But the truth is, you should always, as a teacher, be judged by your weakest student, right? And people with the learning difficulties, the people that are sitting in the back of the classroom, right? And if you don't feel that satisfaction, right, as a teacher, that you're helping what you set out to do, as opposed to be a teacher, then of course you're going to be not satisfied. You're going to want to move out of it. So I think that maybe you're relating to that situation because suddenly it's not what you would wanted to set out to do.
Yeah, definitely. You say that teaching and the adverts are always like your passion and developing the next level. I think I probably only spent about 20% doing what I wanted to do as a teacher. The rest you said was bureaucracy. It was dealing with assessments. And we always hear the comment, teachers have it easy. They only work 9 till 3. I was in almost every day at 6, getting the lessons ready, planning things. I stayed till about 7 or 8. Those lovely half terms and holidays you get, you work through. I very rarely had time to sort of chill out. At the same time as this, my wife was also a teacher in a PMED school, so Prime Multiple and Learning Difficulty school. So we were both really stressed. I'm not going to lie. We were renting a flat. We'd moved out from where we were living at my mum's. And it felt like your life was being a teacher. And you didn't get the satisfaction that you wanted out of being a teacher. You didn't, they're saying, you didn't get that bit of, right, my students have gone on to be good people. I mean, that's the base of it. As a teacher, you want to be good people. I didn't really, sounds a bit weird, but I didn't really care if they went to Red Bricks. Were they happy? Were they doing something that they want to do? Were they making a difference to the UK? Were they providing something for it? And I just didn't get that. And that is probably an indictment of education as a whole, which is, especially sort of at the lower levels, we'll obviously come to other universities later on, but it's very much we will teach you what you need to know rather than we'll teach you how to think. Mm-hmm. And I think that was my biggest step up to going to university, is you go from a school where you're maybe in a class of 15 and the teacher is learn this, do this, that, to a lecture theatre where there's 200 people, where you've got someone talking about sharks. But they're talking. They're not saying you need to learn X, Y, and Z. They're just discussing and they're lecturing about sharks, which is absolutely fascinating for me. But then you're also sitting there going, I have no idea how much this is going to be on an exam and how much is good background knowledge. Now, I love background knowledge. So my ADHD and dyslexia wants me to understand why. So in lessons, I was a massive pain of, why does that do that? Why does that do that? I need to understand the basic building blocks before I can move up. And education didn't really allow that. So said, look, unfortunately, it's not working. It's not what I wanted to do. Spoke to the school and we parted by mutual agreement. And I sort of thought then, I've got a flat. I need a job again. What am I going to do? And luckily, my brother was working for a rail construction company, second tier, called Emeco, based in Hemel, which was literally around the corner from where I lived. And I said to him, look, I'm interested in training, still interested in learning and development. What can you do? And he was like, well, he just left being the HR officer manager and moved over to IT. He said, look, we've got a new HR manager in. There's a lot of training and development in working in rail construction, so come along. So I started off originally and went, you know what, I'll do a month or two, unpaid, get some experience, and then go and apply for other jobs out there. I came in and the department, as a training department, a lead department, there was nothing. It had always been shoved onto HR. It's, hey, you're not busy enough, have an additional responsibility. And the amount of work I walked into was astounding. It made sort of being a teacher look easy. So I sort of sat down with the HR manager and went, look, this is what I want to do. Bish bash. And she went, you know what? I'm going to go to the board, ask for a full-time, and you can have it. Next day she came in and went, look, it's full-time. Here's your salary. Sign the contract. Off you go.
Fantastic. And you know what? Just building on that point. So you went into an organisation where HR was effectively doing it all, or trying to, right? And effectively what you can say here is that, and I've seen this a lot, that everything is put down to HR. But the fact is, learning and development is a separate piece of work. It's a art in itself. It's about building your workforce in a way that is useful now and future-proof for going forward. And I think that's an important point to bring up, because there's so many organizations out there that just do a very similar process, right? But yeah, so going on, then you've got yourself now a title, you've got yourself, a salary, and you're focused on learning and development. So that's where your learning and development journey started, really, in a way that you wanted to, something that you could have an influence on without the constraints of curriculum or without the constraints of you must do it this way, but actually really developing people in what they wanted to be developed in, right? How did you then end up as head of learning and development at the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre? And also, to start off with, just so that we know where we're aiming, what is the UKBIC Battery Industrialisation Centre?
Right, so let's start with that. I think it's quite good. So UKBIC, UK Battery Industrialisation Centre, exists to upscale the work that PhD researchers at Coventry or WNG or wherever it may be into real-world applications. And there's a lovely graphic that you've seen that sort of splits it into gram scale. Now, gram scale is really well covered by PhD researchers. The Faraday Battery Challenge, the Faraday Institution as a whole are really good at sponsoring PhD students to start very small-scale advanced work into the next technologies. So currently we're looking at lithium-ion batteries. Now, lithium-ion batteries, they're not new. They're back from the 1980s. So we've had a lot of time to develop them, and they're in a really good place now, and they're only getting better. But we've got people looking at the new technologies, so sodium-ion to replace lithium-ion. Lithium we currently dig out of the ground in mining. Sodium-ion, in theory, we can take from seawater. So it's a lot of an easier process, potentially, to take it out. People looking at solid state. So looking at removing the liquid electrolyte, which can cause a problem. We've all had alkaline batteries. You leave in a remote for too long that leak everywhere. In theory, solid state, that may not happen. So that's moving forward. We're having people looking at different designs. Currently, you have a cylindrical cell, 21700, so cool because it's about 21 mil wide and 70 mil tall. We have pouch cells. Here at UKBIC, we make 300 mil by 100 pouch cells that you'd find in an electric vehicle or potentially in a laptop or something like that. But people are looking now at sort of the next stage. How can we move forward? How can we get more out of a battery? That's the big one, is how can I make a battery better, either with a longer life cycle or with a higher output of voltage. So we're really, they're really sort of focusing on that. What we do is when they come along and say, we think we've got something, they then sort of move into that kilogram scale. And that kilogram scale is sort of where they work collaboratively with companies. So working with ASC, up in the northeast, or potentially with someone like Aston Martin Lagonda, or automotive, or it could be any industry. The nice thing is we're industry agnostic. You can work for BAE Systems or someone like that. That's where you sort of work with a company and they start to put in the money to say, we think this tech is good. We want this IP. Let's see how we can push it forward. Once that happens, there used to be a gap before you got to the gigaton scale, the gigafactory, that were churning out hundreds of thousands, millions of batteries every year. So the government saw that and went, we need someone to bridge that gap. The gap between the technology readiness levels and the manufacturing readiness levels will probably cost a company somewhere about 120 mil to fill that gap. Yes. So UKBIC was designed and brought in to fill that gap. We are industrialisation. We're not manufacturing. So we're industrialisation. So we work with R&D. We work myself learning development and training people. But most importantly, we are a proof of concept. If you turn up and your mix worked at sort of 10 litres, fantastic, that's brilliant, but that's a small household mix. We're looking at upscaling that to 220 litres, 450 litres, and running it through the entire process of what it would be like to be in a gigafactory. UKBIC has got a line that runs through from electrode, cell assembly, FA&T, and module and pack. So we cover the entire process of creating a battery, and we allow people to come in with their technology and test it without having to invest 80 to 100 million in a line, or even more in an entire building, because they're not cheap. We all saw companies in the UK that have got a great idea, but unfortunately that investment up front is a blocker to some people. I'd like to turn around and say, yep, I've got a spare 500 million somewhere, but it's the haunt of a very few ultra-rich individuals or companies.
Because it comes down to, okay, we've got the tech, right? We've got IP, we've got knowledge. But when you go to scale something, there are so many variables. We know that in manufacturing, it's madness really in terms of, you could take something as simple as making a bread at home, right? Take it on an industrial level or on a manufacturing level, and it's an entirely different thing, right? In terms of trying to get the same quality, the same thing to replicate at scale. Now, so that's where I guess the most important part comes in for yourself and, UKBIC is about dissemination of that knowledge, right? Yes, we're going to scale and we're going to support, businesses in scaling it. But to scale, right, you need people, right? You need skills. You need the people to support that continued innovation and driving that. So you go from doing a learning and development role with a subsection of a HR department, and now you're now running the learning and development, right, for that dissemination of knowledge. Now, in the recent work that I've recently been hearing about is the battery apprenticeship work that you've been doing, which has been significant in because that didn't exist, and a lot of this stuff doesn't exist. There's no benchmarking it against anything, right? Because it is breaking new ground. It is a revolution, right, in itself, and the more and more this market grows, the requirement of skills and all the influence, all the work that you're doing, all the work that we're doing, and in the electrification skills network and the ERS hub, all of this is really connected quite significantly. But talk us through a little bit about that, because you've gone from learning and development to influencing a national apprenticeship curriculum, right? And you're learning behaviors and all that sort of stuff. That an apprenticeship requires, which is now accessible through, obviously we know the levy is connected quite heavily to that. So tell us a little bit about that.
So if I sort of finish my career bit then, because that leads quite nicely into it. So I worked at Emeco for quite a bit of time. I really enjoyed it. It was great fun and it was quite nice starting up a department in essence. But we were heavily involved in London Underground Network Rail work. And one of the things that we were bidding for was HS2 work. We knew it was coming. We were well placed to be a tier 2 subcontractor for M&E for it. We'd already worked with sort of the big companies, your Skanskas, your Balfour Beatties, etc. So we were well placed for it. And they sort of tasked me with get our staff ready for HS2. So obviously that's me going, HS2, this is the first time we've really built a high-speed railway properly on our own as the UK. HS1, the Channel Tunnel, obviously built very much in conjunction with the French authorities and a few large companies. So I sort of had to go away and work out what is high-speed rail? What skills do we need? Now, in the end of it, it didn't come down to us for too much because building a high-speed railway is really no different from building a railway anywhere. The skills we require are very much highlighted already and enshrined in legislation to ensure we're safe workers. Railway is quite a nice, safe place to work. But one of the things I kept noticing was we need engineers. Engineers are really important. These rail engineers are worth their weight in gold. And I kept going around, and to everyone I could find, I went, are we having a national push towards more rail engineers? And they go, no, why? My way was going, because you're launching a massive project. And at this point, obviously, HS2 was going all the way up to Scotland. And we're sitting there going, you've got a big project here. This isn't small. This is probably the largest infrastructure project the UK's undertaken potentially ever. This is huge. And we need to find engineers for this. So where are they coming from? And the response is always, oh, we'll find them. So I kept pushing, hang on, it's a degree. So it's 3 years at university, potentially 2 years at A-level, if we're looking sort of further in the future. And it's getting experience of high-speed rail, which at that moment, you couldn't do. You couldn't go and find someone else building a high-speed railway in the UK because it wasn't happening. So I kept sort of waving the flag of, can we get more people in? Can we get more skills? Can we find another route? Because yes, love universities, you've heard me talk about it, they're very good at what they do, but the limitation is they can only take a certain number of people. Yes. If I go and find a rail engineering course or an engineering course that could lead to rail, there's not millions out there, there's probably tens. Yeah. So if each one of them takes 20, 30 students, or a larger number potentially, then we only have 300 people, which wasn't enough to plug the gap. So I sort of waving my flag saying, hey, what's going to happen is London Underground Network Rail, you're going to lose all your engineers to HS2 because they're going to pay more and we're going to have a wage spiral. They went, oh, it'll be fine. HS2 started, and almost every work on large-scale projects started to slow down because engineers were jumping ship. And that really sort of stuck in my head a bit of, hang on a second, we spend a lot of time in the UK, almost ever. I mean, a lot of the companies we work with, they're not UK-only companies, they're worldwide. And no one thinks of the skill. We always think of, oh yeah, can we physically do it? Can we get millions of tons worth of steel to make the rail? Yeah, we can. Can we find a company to make the rail for us? Yeah, we can. But no one was ever sitting down and going, hang on, this is a project that's going to hire 40,000 people. Where are they coming from?
And you're bleeding that ecosystem, right? Because why wouldn't I? Right? Why wouldn't I leave to go to someone that's paying me more, a new exciting project to work on, just for the bragging rights? So I'm working on HS2, right? It doesn't make sense that we don't put skills in line with, like you said, the physical elements. Great, we've got lots of steel. Who's going to wield it, right? Who's going to do something with it, right? Is a secondary thought. Mm-hmm. So I can just see exactly, I can absolutely relate to why this has happened.
Mm-hmm. It's a real interesting one, because I'm saying sort of almost a jump forward to a jump back is every time I've gone to a company to do learning and development, it's very much been, you're the first person we've had. And it's very telling that skills, which in my mind, and probably I'm slightly biased here because I work at LED, but skills needs to be the forefront. You can't do something without having the skills. I'm an avid DIYer, and the wife loves to remind me of that, but very much goes, oh, I need something built, go and build XYZ. So I built one of those big sweet carts for our wedding because I had a load of pallet wood, and I was like, you know what, I'll give it a go. So I went away, and the first thing I did was I researched the skills I'd need. I researched the equipment I'd need and what I need to do. And a lot of the time, you don't see that in business. People go, yes, we'll do it. Then they realise afterwards, oh, we don't have the skills and the knowledge. We don't know what we're doing, really, to be quite blunt about it. So sort of did that point, and then I got headhunted by the National College for High-Speed Rail at that point, NCHSR, based in Birmingham, one of the government's 5 national colleges. And I was brought over there to help them with their commercial training programme. This is my first sort of foray into delivering content to a paying customer rather than supporting a business to ensure what we're doing. And I went over there, and the first thing I did was right, ground rules. This is the basics we need for people to work on the rail. Let's forget about HS2. Let's work with the companies to get them on the rail. So there's a card called a Sentinel card to gain access to the rail, very akin to almost a driving license, as you were. You can't access the rail without it. And you have to go through a lot of different training and medicals to get through it. So we offered a service there that said, look, we're going to bring that all together. Because very rarely was it brought together. There were a couple of companies that went, oh, we've got a medical arm, so you can send them over there, and then here's our training arm. But no one had ever really gone, right, all the courses you need to work on the rail, there they are, offer them as one big project to someone or one big offering. So as an LD department, I spent most of my time shopping around because I want to go, oh, I need this course for a medical, and I need this course for something else, and I need this course. And you go, okay, I have to approach 6 different companies to find out any of this, and I have to narrow that down to the 3 and then deliver it back to you. That's a lot of my time.
So segmented, yeah.
So segmented. So I sort of said, look, we're going to offer a one-stop shop in essence. So we work with partners at one-stop shop, and then NCHSR, with a review from the government, turned into NCATI, the National College for Advanced Transport and Infrastructure. Because yet again, what the government had done is it had gone, we'll set up the college and it'll do its own thing. They hadn't mandated HS2 to work with them. They hadn't mandated any subcontractors to work with them. So when we came and offered a service and offered a lot of apprenticeships for it, again, around high-speed rail, looking at qualifications for engineers to become high-speed rail engineers, there wasn't a impetus to do it from the company. If they already had a relationship with Aston University, they carried on using Aston. If they had a relationship with a graduate program from University College Birmingham or University of Birmingham, they carried on using them because we're creatures of habit. People are, and there's no getting away from it, which is we like what we like and we don't like what we don't know. So there wasn't that jump for it was very difficult because most of the departments we were talking to, the training department again was someone in HR. There wasn't a full-time head of L&D or manager. It was always a training coordinator. That was part of the HR department because, and you mentioned sort of earlier, is training is a subsection of HR. I'm not afraid to admit that, but it's a specialism. It's like turning around and saying, you're an engineer, so can you go and fix my gas? No, I'm a mechanical engineer. And people in business and outside, we need to understand that that is what's happening. HR isn't a one job. You have got 20, 30 specialisms in it. And when you get to large companies, all these specialisms are split out. But in your smaller companies, They're not. And HR is dumped upon time and time again to basically go, oh, well, you'll do benefits and you'll do payroll and you'll do staff recruitment and you'll do staff retention and you'll do staff development. And after a while, the generalist, because they are a HR generalist, will just go, I can't. There's not enough hours in the day. There's not enough of me. At that point, you sort of get businesses go, oh, what's the most important thing? Oh, skills now. Great, we'll get an L&D department. So worked with NCATI for about 2 years in Birmingham. And I sort of got to a point where I was like, I'm not making the difference I want to. I'm not having the impact that I want to have for my career as a person. We all like to think, well, that we'll be remembered for certain things, but my bit was very much, I just want to make a difference. I think gone are the days where you start a company at 16, walk in the door, and you stay there till you retire and get your lovely golden carriage clock. That time's gone. People of my generation and younger, making me feel a little bit older there, really want to see a change. And actually, if someone's offering a better work-life balance or better benefits or better pay, you're going to move. Gone are the days where you went to your company and said, I'm being offered a job for 10,000 more. Nowadays, the company go,
Yeah. Well, even the psychological element of it, these days we see all the social media, we see all the young people using this. Every time they do that, it's almost like they're reinventing themselves. Mm-hmm. And going to a new job after a couple of years means they can reinvent their image, reinvent who they are with a bit more experience, right? And they can be someone more valuable than they were before. And that journey means that they end up jumping over to different businesses, which is actually okay, right? Because the variety that's required, the variety of knowledge that you gain in that space is very important. Now, coming back to the actual, the problem with HS2 and the learning development there, I can absolutely see, the trajectory of work that's required in the development, which is why I started, the Electric Revolution Skills Hub and the work in the ESN, which is, again, such an important part of setting those quality and standards. But you've now gone from, you've gone from all sorts of angles to really understanding why skills are so important. Because up until now, I think you were definitely seeing the problem and trying to make others understand it, but having not as much impact because you've got to bring everybody else along with you. What then pushed you into the UKBIC side? And
so yeah, it's quite nice actually, because I saw the advert for UKBIC because it was during COVID. So the college was making large redundancies. They'd sort of seen that, unfortunately, the numbers weren't as they wanted to be. The teams had grown larger than the college could support. So they basically went, look, we're not furloughing people, we're putting people out on redundancy. And I was working on a project with Soprasteria to work on a competency trading marketplace, an idea that a load of individuals would turn up and put all their courses as a company onto one database. And then you'd be able to go on and just say, I want a course in X, Y, and Z, and you'd be given 20 or 30 different training companies in your area with a quality stamp from NCHSR or NCAT as it was at that point. So I was kept on furlough, one of the few people, but it sort of made me feel, oh, if that's how the company view staff, I don't really want to be a part of that. I don't want to be part of a company that just goes, yeah, we've had a bit of trouble, so bye. I'm much more of a one that would be in a company, or like to be in a company where someone told them when we're hitting hard times, so senior leadership are taking.
You want a company that can ride the waves, right, in a storm.
Yeah.
Not one that throws the stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
out to sea.
And a lot of it comes at down point of very much there was some very highly paid people at the college, and the disparity between normal workers and SLT was large. And there wasn't an offer of, we'll take a pay cut. There was we'll get rid of the people that, without being too mean, do the work. And without the people that do the work, unfortunately, NCATI is now folded as an organisation. It was bought out from the government by one of the universities. And unfortunately, due to the requirement for it and the push, it never got back on its feet. So at that point, I saw an advert for UKBIC and I went, I fancy working in batteries. That sounds quite nice. Like, I've done a bit of rail, spoken a lot about companies about moving towards electrification in rail, getting rid of diesel trains, making them somehow work with it. And my brother, who's got a PhD from Oxford, lovely bloke, was working for Shell. and they were doing a lot of interesting work around batteries at this time. So I was sort of thinking, I fancy this role. It started originally as an L&D coordinator, and the job advert was basically yet again, we're growing, we've got to support our own internal people, industry, and make some money in a way. We're looking for someone, so come along. So I went for the interview, did really well. Met Damien, who is my current boss at the moment, the HR director, really nice bloke. Got to the final interview, and unfortunately was just pipped by someone who had manufacturing experience. Right. So I sort of went around, that's a bit annoying. I'm not going to get too angry. You know what? Dust myself off. I'm going to get some manufacturing experience. So I started looking around for places that were looking for anyone in manufacturing, and came across a company based in Worcester called Van der Mortela, who probably most people have never heard of. But if you ever bought a cheese twist or a chocolate twist from 90% of supermarkets, they're made there. So I went in there, and they were looking for someone, a training officer, to come in and support their upgrading of a new line. So they've been open since 1991, and they hadn't put a new manufacturing line in before that. So the company had invested and gone, right, Brexit's happening. We want to continue making in there, so we can't look at importing all of our croissants and things that they're currently making in sort of France and Poland to the UK. So we'd upgrade your line. So we need someone to basically deal with all of the training. So I went, hey, you know what, applied for that. Went for the interview, did really well. And they said, yep, we want you. So I joined there as training officer. Yet again, brand new role, massive project. So it was a 8 million install for the line, which obviously at that point, for that's quite a large amount of money. So I came in and was suddenly hit again by how we had loads of people that had great knowledge, fantastic tacit knowledge. We had people that could look at dough and go, needs more salt, needs more water, needs more flour. Amazing people whose skills weren't being captured. So I spent my first lot of it going, we need to write competency matrices. We need to understand what these people have, the skills that makes them amazing, so we don't lose them. Because obviously, with the factory shutting down, there was a lot of, we only want to keep the best people.
Because the old problem where you've got a sort of aging workforce and you're not passing those skills down has been something that's been more and more of a problem, especially in engineering, manufacturing. And, you know, now, obviously, you know, you're working in this space, right? And you're capturing these competencies. But you then went very quickly from doing that to going into UKBIC and suddenly becoming head of learning and development in UKBIC to making, you know, apprenticeships. Now, obviously, one of the most important things, right, that is going to be important to our audience, right, is about engaging with electrification. But you've opened up a pathway that allows them to engage in a different way than just your academic route, right? So I guess my question is, right, when now that we've got this, you know, battery, you know, apprenticeship program, how do people engage with it?
So the battery apprenticeship has been launched now. It got launched last year. Currently, at the moment, they're going through a process of agreeing the endpoint assessments. So people that come at the end and say, yeah, you've achieved it. In my mind, I'd like to see it launched nationwide, really, if we're going to hit this number. And you've heard me tout the number, but when I first joined UKBIC, 25,000 new workers were needed. And that was in 2021. 2022 came around and the Faraday Battery Challenge release said, oh no, it's not that, it's 35,000. And then this year, I think they came out and said, oh, it might not be 35,000, it might be 45,000. And I can see that number only growing. And that's really only to hit the number that we need for automotive. The UK is brilliant automotive, but we've also got BAE Systems. We've got marine. We've got aerospace. We've got Rolls Royce. So many. Right. And we focus so much on automotive.
That's transport, right? We've got energy storage, energy production. We've got manufacturing and robotics. There's so much. It's unbelievable.
Massive, absolutely massive. So really what I do is say not unlearn the lessons that we saw with HS2 and get to sort of as many people as possible and say, it needs to be launched now. It's a 3-year apprenticeship, and I understand years 2 and 3 need to be with a company that's actually undertaking battery manufacturing. So we sort of launched that and we said, look, we're going to support people as much as possible. Unlike most places where with colleges, if you were going to launch a course in welding, you'd find someone come to the end of their career and you go, you've got 40 years of experience in welding. We want to have you as you retire to teach. And they go, brilliant, my knees are hurting. I don't want to get weld anymore. So fantastic. We can't do that in battery manufacturing. It is such a new technology for manufacturing a large scale that we don't really have retirees. We can go and borrow people from other industries. Food manufacturing is brilliant for the electrode side, pharmaceuticals, wallpaper making, paint, that sort of thing, paper trade is brilliant. But we really need to give them the skills to be able to excel. One of the things I'm very worried about is that we've got a lot of people. AESC are building a new gigafactory up in the northeast. Yeah. Brilliant. We've heard rumours of other companies coming to the UK and wanting to build up their own manufacturing lines. But if they need 45,000 people, where are they coming from? The UK is in, quite happily, a nice period of very low unemployment. And the people that usually are unemployed are long-term unemployed, long-term sick, or people that can't work. And it's our duty as the UK to support them. But where are we going to get these 45,000 people from? We kept being told that when Brexit would happen, we'd lose everything and everything would collapse. Nothing's really collapsed. Things have grown, which is great for the economy, but a worry for me of where we're going to find these people. So my big one is what we've tried to do at the apprenticeship is we've obviously gone, that's the apprenticeship. We'll work with the awarding bodies to come out with an endpoint assessment and we'll start to do it as an apprenticeship. Now, I'm no fool. I know we're not going to train 45,000 people in apprenticeships. A large portion are probably going to be not classically or qualifiedly trained, but they're going to learn on the job. So we turned to EAL and we said, look, we want to work and create a qualification of this. I'm very big on service leavers. We work with the HS2, the CTP, the Career Transition Pathway, where they get service leavers who have obviously left the army, who want to move back into civilian life. And a lot of them have got quite a lot of knowledge, but have never gained a qualification because if you're in the army, you don't need to. But if you come across someone that's been doing the electrics on a Challenger 2 tank, that's far more complex than anything you're ever going to do at university even maybe. So we try to give a route to them to basically say, here's a qualification, a certificate, an award, and a diploma. So you can come in and go, I've got prior knowledge, here's my recognition of prior knowledge, do a few courses, give them a nice certificate that says, right, according to EAL and UKBIC and the ESN, you are qualified to go work in battery manufacturing. Send them off on their merry way. So we've actually got people coming into it. Because as we've seen a lot before, people do this bit of build it and they will come. And they build a gigafactory and they turn around and go, I haven't got staff. And that sort of obviously puts
those, if there are no skills, right, then, the factory turns around and, sits on its, to be able to try to support that. But actually, they then retrospectively start going to all the colleges, universities, say, we really desperately need people and we need them yesterday. Well, did you not know that 4 years ago, right? When you were building the factory. But the thing is, it's a bit chicken and egg, right? Because your apprenticeship that you've developed is very important because it sort of says to the idea that because apprenticeship's done in employment, effectively, right? But you need an employer. So the chicken and egg situation is that you need a factory there to do the apprenticeship, but you also need the apprenticeship there to say that you've got a program to support the development of skills, and that inward investment that comes in. We're not being unrealistic here, but the truth is that most of the big manufacturers, OEMs, or anyone that's going to invest in a gigafactory, right, tend to be international, right, or multinationals. And for them to say, come to my backyard, right, and build a factory, they need reassurance their investment isn't going to be sitting in a corner somewhere waiting for the skills to emerge, right? The activity that you're doing, the activity that we're doing is all leading up to this. So coming down to the next part of this, what are your biggest challenges, right? What is your biggest challenge? If you to name it, what's your biggest challenge and what would you like to see happening in the next year, 2 years? And I say that because normally I can say, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? But it's such an immediate problem. What would you like to see the next year look like?
I think the biggest problem is the misunderstanding of skills. A lot of people, and it's one thing, sweeping generalization here, but almost every company I've worked at, your MD has come from a finance background. They very rarely come from manufacturing because they don't understand the nuances of issues in manufacturing. They're great at their jobs, don't get me wrong. All the CEOs and MDs I work for have been fantastic, but they have that viewpoint. And as you turn up, and prior to now, not having a head department sort of title at UKBIC, you turn up as a coordinator or an officer, and it's, what do you know? I'm the MD. And that's because they've got so much on their plate, they can't. But it's very much but hang on, without being too mean, as you said, you could build a gigafactory. If you've got no skills or need for it, it will sit there empty. Perfect example, Tesla. built a lovely gigafactory in Germany to produce Teslas, and it's working 10% efficiency because the demand's not there. The supply isn't there. So I'd really like to get people in the positions that have the ability to change things, whether that be around funding, whether it be around skills delivery, whether it be even in companies or governmental level, to understand the issues that are there and start to think, how can we counteract those issues, rather than leaving it to the companies. Because you and I spent a lot of time talking about a competency profile. I'd like to work, and part of the ESN's mission with UKBIC on it is to come up with a competency profile of someone that works in battery manufacturing. So any company can turn up and I can turn around and say, there's 4 or 5 documents, spreadsheets. They explain the skills, the knowledge, behaviour, like in the apprenticeship you need to have. Here's the sort of competence you need to have. Here's the training. Here's where you can get it. A real nice, easy route into it, making it as easy as possible so people know exactly what they want to do. A bit like thinking about going to be a policeman. When you become a policeman or a policewoman, you have a route. There's a qualification, there's training, you go into it. Same with working in the fire service, same with working in NHS. We've seen from my career that it was varied. I would never have said 5 years ago I'd be here sitting and talking to you as head of development.
That's really interesting because, every single guest that I've had who has been working in this space has had a strange journey to it, right? Yours probably the most wildest, going from marine biology to battery, but it's been different. And I guess that what that really does is sort of amplify the fact that the routes are not clear, right? And that we need to work harder to make those routes clear. Now, the good thing is that we're working together, and the ERS hub, that's trying to disseminate the knowledge in a clear way, because you said something earlier about putting it all in one place. And that's what we're trying to do effectively, is trying to put all of this knowledge, have that input from the country, and remove the idea that this is about any one organization, that this is about any one in particular, gigafactory or, a new startup or, new big company or OEM. It's a collective support, right, for the economy. Because when you do that, that answers the question, where are all these people going to come from? Well, the people are there. It's the pathways that are not clear, right? And we've got to make sure that our job, right, working together, right, is about amplifying and shouting about, like we're doing on this podcast, that we are making a difference to reach out to this community, to grow it, so that it becomes very clear to become part of this. What would you like to see in this next year, right, as part of the work? Because UKBIC obviously supports us with the Electrification Skills Network, right? We've got, boards together, industry advisory boards, and all of this stuff that we're doing. What would you like to see in the next year?
It's going to seem like a big ask, but I'd really like to see that reflected on a governmental level. We in the UK are very good at letting the industry choose. The government doesn't like to usually get involved until later on. And that's quite in comparison to when we look at the rest of Europe. France and Germany are very much, if something pops up, the government are the first one there. They're the ones that set the skills requirements, they're the ones that set the safety requirements. The UK government, because we're quite an open capitalist industry, and we really try and push towards that, well, we're not going to tell you as government officials, you know what you're doing. When you come to an agreement, we'll join in. I'd really like to see government move forward and faster to start talking to us, to start talking to companies, to say, right, what are going to be your issues? How can we alleviate those issues? How can we, as the UK government, ensure that the billions of pounds that are currently being generated from export and internal use of internal combustion engines, how can we ensure that that continues? And UKBIC is a small part of that. I'm not going to lie, we've been set up for that, and the ESN, but I'd really like to see big hitters getting involved to say, this is what's happening, and get that message out there. You and I are screaming about it everywhere we go. We're on panels, we're talking about it, but there's only 4 or 5 of us really that are screaming about it. I'd like to see that number grow, and everyone start to just have a conversation of, battery manufacturing, that might be exciting. Get it into schools, get it into STEM activities of, hey, have you thought of working in X? But also using the knowledge they have as educators and parents as well. They're probably the biggest influencers on what children want to do, is have a conversation of, you are good at X, Y, and Z. Those are your skills. Therefore, these careers are good for you. I don't think I ever sat down once in my education career and had a one-to-one with a careers advisor, ever. That would probably have sat down and gone, Jonty, you know what? You're quite good at, in your head, you're quite good at visualizing things. You're quite fast at doing things. You're wonderfully hyperactive, and you can do things that involve movement and things. Who probably would have directed me towards an apprenticeship. And I think if I had to go back and do it again, I would say to myself, go to an apprenticeship, go become a Sparky, go and gather a skill that has got limitless potential, and you can do three things, but actually you're working and doing rather than sitting in a classroom trying to absorb information that I'm sitting there going, but what about? So yeah, it's almost second ask out of that is education to catch up.
Yeah. So if you were to say one last message before we close, right, to the audience and what you would want them to do, maybe a call to action, what would that be?
It's almost twofold here. My first one would be you don't have to be doing a qualification in battery manufacturing or whatever it may be to work in that industry. It's the actual number of jobs that are required to have that qualification are very narrow. If I look at UKBIC, the entire side of our office, it's finance. We don't need a battery manufacturing degree to that. It's marketing and PR. You don't need it there. Project management, HR, L&D, IT, health and safety. You don't need to be a battery manufacturing expert to work in those areas. Those jobs are available. I think the other one, the call to action, is think about what you can do. And it sounds a bit weird, but alluding to the previous comment is just because you don't have that tick in a box skill doesn't mean you can't bring anything. I'd almost prefer to have people from outside of battery manufacturing work for me. And I've currently got some positions out there that we're recruiting for because I like the idea that we can work with people that don't have the mentality of, but it's always done that way. And you've come from automotive. Automotive, it's always been done that way. Yes. And we're really trying to break that mold of, actually, there are so many different ways we can do it. So let's have that nice diversification in recruitment and education to ensure that we have a holistic team to deliver this very, very important strategy of electrification in the UK.
Well, thank you, Jonty. Today's been such an interesting conversation, and, you know, hopefully the work that we keep shouting about, right, will continue to hit the ears that it needs to, but also make a difference to the people that, you know, want to be part of this or don't even know they want to be part of this. So thank you again for all the work that you're doing. Great work, right? And let's continue to work together.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this electrifying episode of Switching On Electrified Skills podcast. Together, we'll shape a future that is powered by electricity. If you would like to learn more about electrification and explore courses and jobs, please visit ershub.co.uk or connect with us via social media channels. Thank you once again for joining me today. Until next time, keep charging ahead and unleash the full potential of your electrifying skills.